Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having us on your screens once again for another edition of the Live Wire. Our guest today is Michael Cato, and Michael is the Interim Vice Chancellor for IT Services here at the university. He's also the university's Chief Information Officer. Michael, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
So I guess, the starting point is, how does somebody view the IT profession today as something that, can you ever get to the front of the train on this, or do you just hop on and hold on tight and hope that we can figure out a little bit more as we go along?
And just enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
In some ways, I suspect it will always be a mix of enjoy the ride, try to understand what might be coming ahead, but I think we also have to ask ourselves the question very often: do we even want to be on the bleeding edge, as we like to describe it? I do think there are some opportunities that can come with that, but there are also some serious risks that can come as well. And so there's where you want to make sure you have the nuts and bolts working properly, that you've got the core functionality that you need to the terminologies to run the business, right? This is an academic setting, so to make sure that we are able to deliver our courses, that we can do our research, that we can do our community engagement, achieve the institutional mission, but also that we have enough capacity to do the R&D to really look ahead and not get surprised when a new opportunity comes up. I think that for us represents probably the greatest challenge right now, especially because of how IT at this institution has historically been structured, so that we are not necessarily investing in doing both at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we seem to flip between the investment strategies, and that continues to be part of the challenge as well.
And those of us who've had the privileged opportunities to work in higher education in whatever capacity, if we were there 10, 15 years ago, we were experiencing hands-on with leading edge technology, and we would go home to our dial-up modems and say, what happened to, why isn't this what somebody said something about a T1 at work today. What does that mean? T1 versus dial-up modem. But I think we have come to the point now where what you can do at home, it has come up a good bit, and then you come to work with much more fluency and versatility in various aspects of communication technology, which would seem to heighten the expectation on you to say, how come this isn't as good as I now know it can be? Yeah. And what do you do with what you say is the current term in IT, which is the consumerization?
Consumerization, yeah. It's funny because we're IT, so we've got terms for everything, but consumerization, I think, is one of those that is really descriptive. That challenge continues to be it. Now that I can have all these advanced services at home, many of them for cheap, most of them for free, it's really difficult to then come to work and to be confined and not have those same levels of functionality that I'm used to in my personal life. Just taking storage as a simple example, we still offer much less storage to our students than they can get in Google or Dropbox or any of the services that they're used to using. And we will never, to be totally honest with you, I don't think we'll ever be able to scale out our campus storage to serve the student need to match that. And so we start asking the question, should we even want to? Maybe we should be focusing instead on allowing them to use services like that in ways that are stable and reliable and predictable. And so, as an example, the institution has a Google Apps account. So it allows us then to provide some of those services. Student email is now on the Microsoft system. Same thing. Why compete and try to come up with our own email service and invest in running it when we know there could be a solution we can use with them as well? So there comes an opportunity to try to take advantage of those, but it does make it challenging when there are some things that should not be in systems like that. If we have sensitive data, security is a big deal for us, for any institution, but also their research work, right? It's proprietary. You want to make sure that you protect your institutional property. You don't want to put those in systems that may not have the contracts around it. And for many of those, what we call free services, they're actually not free. Sure. I'm trading my, not necessarily my identity, but I'm definitely trading my privacy for the ability to use these systems, because it allows them to study more about my behaviors to then turn around to advertisers and sell that information. So there is a trade. It does have a cost. It just might not be obvious to those of us who are using them.
Sure. You're watching the live wire on Inside UNC Charlotte, and our guest today is Michael Cato, Interim Vice Chancellor for IT and Chief Information Officer here at UNC Charlotte. And Michael, we'll talk maybe in a little greater detail in a minute about the issue of being centralized in a culture that's increasingly over the years become decentralized here on campus. But can you give us sort of the thumbnail sketch of how IT services works in relation to the various other IT units that have developed over campus over the years, and maybe in terms of percentages, how much is central IT versus decentralized IT here on campus?
Well, right now we've got estimates. So, well, one piece we know pretty much for sure, which is headcount. We can tell, HR can tell which positions are actually banded as IT positions. And using that metric, it's almost 50-50, but I think the majority of staff members are still decentralized. ITS right now is about 115 positions, and they're just about that much. I think it's a little bit more outside of ITS. So the bulk of that might be in the colleges. Many of the colleges have their own IT units. In fact, I actually led one of the college IT units for 5.5 years before coming into ITS. But then Student Affairs has as well, Business Affairs has. So you have all these different groups that have, really they developed over the years because the central IT group was not really positioned to provide many of the services that those groups knew they needed. And so instead of going without and then pretty much jeopardizing their ability to function, they developed to some level, varying degrees of levels, their ability to provide for their own services. ITS, the central group, has always been responsible for things, the core services we call them, things like network, email, though it wasn't always email. There was a time where the central group had one email system and one of the colleges had another, so even that was centralized fairly recently in the history of the institution. There are some of those utility functions that are being provided more by the central IT group. But then what some people think of as utility end up being core to the institutional mission, Banner, right? No matter how anyone may actually feel about Banner at different times in their career, Banner is one of those services that is probably our most mission critical service. I say probably because it's difficult to say Banner is more mission critical than the systems it relies on to function.
Right.
So you can't really say the network's less important than Banner because you can't get to Banner without the network. So those services ITS is responsible for. And when it works well, it's a partnership. It's a partnership so that the distributed units know those specialized areas that they have needs in, and they can work with central IT so that if that system needs to connect to Banner or that system relies on the network, that we can help to make sure that those pieces get put in place in the ways that they need to, and that the service itself is reliable. That should be the goal. And I think we have had varying degrees of success with that. So,
well, and varying degrees of success is kind of a lead into a question I have for you, and that is, IT, because of what we've discussed, the consumerization, the shifting of expectations, the idea that maybe there shouldn't even be any problems when I come to work with IT and connectivity and the things I want to do, and the things I want to do has become this mountain of opportunity for me. And I look to you and I say, at any given moment, how come this doesn't work? And IT kind of becomes, maybe for some people, one of those units that's just, I'm frustrated.
yeah.
What do you hear? How much do you hear? What are the common frustrations that users in any of our user categories on campus, from students to faculty members to staff members, bring to IT? What are you doing about it?
Well, I'll pick one, and it was one that I expressed, I've been here 7 years, that I expressed repeatedly in my experience here. I call it transparency. Mm-hmm. I've had different terms have been given to me when we've gotten feedback on it. Sometimes people describe it as, I wish I had more communication from ITS. And I've followed that up often and asked, well, help me understand, is it you just want us to tell you when we've already done something? Because to me, that's communication, but that might not be what you actually are asking for. If what you'd like to be involved in the decision making, that to me is different. And I think it's a valid request. In fact, I would encourage it, and it's something that I believe we desperately need. And so to that end, over the last, I think it's about 10 or 11 months, we've been working on a process to stand up a new IT governance model. And it's one of those things that for a lot of people, it sounds like more bureaucracy, but the end goal is to try to build in that transparency and really shift the decision making about what are the IT priorities from ITS to the institution as a whole. So you have these governance bodies that are set up that have representatives from different groups around campus, so that when we bring to them, here are the needs as we've heard them, or they bring in their own needs, we can decide as a body, here are the priorities, understanding the capacity we have, the resources we have. These are the ones that are going to be our priority for the moving forward. And that body then becomes the decision-making body to really help us align what we do with what the institution actually needs. I would give that as one example.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we as a university community use in our connectivity in terms of bandwidth, and what does it look like numbers wise?
Well, let me show you a graph.
Okay.
I brought two that I think will be pretty informative. The first is a graph of our overall bandwidth utilization as an institution, and this is actually using megabits per second. Let's see if I can give you a good measure. Most of us at home, I have the fastest internet connection that Time Warner provides in the city of Charlotte. Well, not me as an individual, but I have that level of service. And 45 megs, I believe, is what I have. So it would be 45 on this scale. We as an institution in 2010, our maximum was just under 400, 334, so just over 300, sorry. But 95% of our utilization was around 264. And then it's gone up dramatically between 2010 and 2012. Now, the interesting thing is, in 2012, our actual limit was 1,000. We had a 1 gig connection, which is 1,000 megabits. And if you actually look at this, we were pushing 80% of our utilization at that time. And so last year, my predecessor, Jay Dominic, and the chancellor worked together and funded a project to change our internet connection from a 1,000 limit to a 10,000 limit. And as you can probably see, we did it just in time. Because so far into 2013, we've approached 945, keeping in mind that 1,000 was our previous limit.
Now, we might look at those numbers and think, well, of course, we're growing. We have more students, over time, more faculty and staff, but that's not necessarily really at all what's contributing to this.
That's correct. It represents probably a portion of it,
Yeah.
but we're talking about a 3 to 4-fold increase in the amount of bandwidth that we're consuming. I've done an exercise just out of curiosity. I've met with the student government 2 weeks ago, meeting with the student senate, to give them an update on some of the things that we're doing around student computing. Something that I'm hoping we get a chance to talk about, even skipping through here, but happy to come back and talk about at length. And I've asked them a question that I'm fond of asking. I'd ask our I won't say studio audience, I'll ask our audience, how many devices do you have on you now that are capable of using the network? And it's always been intriguing to me, asking that question. My answer from the student group at that time, I just, everybody if you have something on you that can access the network now, put your hand up. Everybody put their hand up. If you have 2, keep your hand up. Everybody else put your hand down. Most of the group still had their hand up. If you have 3, maybe about half the group kept their hand up.
Yeah.
I said 4, pretty much everybody dropped except 1. And then I said 5, and she actually had 5 devices on her that day. So she had 2 laptops, 2 tablets, and a phone for some reason that day. And I'm thinking, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing I have 3 on me, my phone, my tablet, and my laptop. On average, I have at least 2 of those at any time. That's what starts to drive that utilization up, because it's not that we're using them in tandem anymore. We tend to have them out and are using at least 2 of them at the same time.
And again, folks coming into our campus community with the expectation that there's no question this is going to work. It's going to work seamlessly from home to campus, and I would hazard to guess that you believe that that's an expectation that's perfectly reasonable for them to have.
That I do.
Yeah.
That I do. And well, let me show you one other, and then we'll talk about this in a bit more. Wireless becomes the one that I think gets the most attention, especially in that regard. This is one of my favorite metrics. It's the maximum number of simultaneous Wi-Fi connections that we've experienced. And unlike the previous graph that went back 4 years, this is a 2-year span. So
Sure.
Spring 2011 to this semester, we have almost quadrupled the maximum number of simultaneous connections we've seen on wireless.
That's incredible.
And it is just the increase, and again, that goes back to those 2 or 3 or 4 devices all use wireless.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole breed of devices now. I mean, I happen to be using one now that don't even come with a wired connection anymore.
Now, put it down to super consumer level, like something I would understand. But, you know, starting the conversation reminiscing about the good old days of the dawn of the World Wide Web, has there been any particular category in the world of IT where you've seen this fast of a growth, whether it's, you know, in connectivity or in devices used or in any other way you would measure fast growth, or is this it?
I think that this is driven by the increases in, so we'll say devices, right? So taking tablets. When the iPad came out, I remember watching I hesitate to admit just how geeky I can be, but I remember watching Steve Jobs unveiling the first iPad. And I was watching it with members of my staff in the College of Health and Human Services at the time. And we were so just excited about just the concept of what this could represent that we submitted our order that day. We didn't get them right away, but we submitted the order that day. And within the IT community, there was actually some disconnect. There was this disagreement on whether the iPad would actually be successful.
Yeah.
Because tablets had been around for a long time. You know, Microsoft had pioneered the tablet platform. I had been a tablet consumer, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, and had really liked them, but it was like convincing people that these would actually be useful. But they got it right. Apple really did get it right, and it has really driven, I think, a lot of the shift to using wireless devices more often. We've all had laptops a long time. But I think that a lot of what we're seeing in that increase is because the devices have become much more functional and much more light and much easier to use.
And interesting, you know, the warp speed of the challenges that evolve for you in what you do. I mean, it seems pretty amazing to me. I was at a conference last year where somebody made the bold prediction that we will cross the line where the majority of us use tablets and smartphones versus our desktop or even laptop computers, more so by maybe 2015. And just, you know, a few weeks ago I heard a similar expert say more like, you know, the end of this calendar year we'll have crossed the line where more people are connected on a regular basis through smartphones and tablets than they are with that old-fashioned idea of a computer or a laptop. Yeah. So how do you begin to keep up with that when you have a system here at this university that is really geared toward what? I mean, in terms of how many generations ago, and you're talking about, you know, hardware that's obsolete in 60 days, 90 days, that kind of thing. Kind of gets back to that question of how do you do it?
Well, and that definitely represents part of our great challenge. And part of what we've been doing is making sure that if we put the networks in, that you also plan for the ability to refresh them as best you can. Yeah. I'll take an example of Niner Wi-Fi. You know, that we've been calling it authenticated wireless for a long time, but as we branded it as Niner Wi-Fi, and, you know, with help from your teams really to help us get that message out, that we're moving. We hear your frustration that I shouldn't have to log into the wireless every time I switch buildings. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have to go back in and authenticate every hour when I know I'm going to be connected all day. I'm going to be coming back to that device all day. And so taking that feedback gave us the opportunity to rethink how the service itself gets deployed. And I give a lot of credit to our network team. They worked really hard, networking and our security teams, to get together to think through how can we do this in a way that adds a level of functionality that campus needs. These aren't wants anymore. And I think that was part of the shift. When we built the network, let's say 10 years ago, our thinking was the wired network would be the main network, and wireless is just an add-on. Mm-hmm. You know, people will use it casually, maybe use it between meetings. Yeah, right. Yeah. And in many ways, that was true then. Yeah. You know, it's just that now many people, will end up being on both at the same time, or when they're connected on wireless, especially with tablets, you want it to be able to stay accessible and stay connected the entire time that you're here.
Talk a little bit about the process you went through to develop the improvements in the Wi-Fi connectivity on campus, and do you have a visual you can show us on
I've got I've got a visual I can
Imagine
show you
process.
on what's coming.
Okay.
So let me jump ahead a little bit. We'll circle back if we have time to those.
Okay.
We are doing, so I've already talked a little bit about Niner Wi-Fi. I think
Mm-hmm.
most of the campus community is familiar with it. Though I will joke that I've had more students tell me that they love it and they are connected to it and on it all the time. We get the same feedback from faculty, but I still catch some of our older faculty and administrators who are still using the old system, which essentially means they've got to log in at least once a day. Most of the students have gone through the process to get logged in, and it just stays logged in, and I'm watching that difference with some intrigue.
Do you want to define older, or do you want to just let that?
No, I'm going to let that go, because I have to put myself in that category now. And as I'm reminded whenever I stand and talk to a group of students, as I did this morning.
Yeah.
But the first piece of it was to make sure that the authentication itself worked and shifting the functionality. The second piece, which is going to take us longer to do, is to now extend the availability of the system overall.
Sure.
So this is actually a graph, the study that was done. We actually have these same graphs for pretty much every, I call it every useful building, because it won't be every storage closet and things like that, but every useful building on campus. This particular example is taken from the second floor of the Duke building. The left graph shows you how the coverage itself looks now. And the way to read this is the darker the blue, the stronger the wireless concentration, right? And so you'll notice that we have probably a third of the floor that doesn't have wireless at all, even though we do have access on that floor. So what the vendor has recommended is a different configuration with different technologies that will allow us to essentially blanket the entire floor.
Sure.
And again, the goal is to be able to do this for every floor of every useful or used building on campus, just thinking through the terminology on that.
How do you get to that in the first place? The image there on the left, how do you establish early on the parking of the technology kind of all concentrated in one end? I mean, why not? Wouldn't it have made sense at the outset to
spread it out?
To spread it out?
Some of this I wasn't directly involved with at the time, but my guess would be it was a matter of the availability of funds and the advancements in the technologies.
You're talking about a device that's up in the ceiling, right?
That's correct. It's up in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And in this case, now this is a part that's interesting to me. This is just using 3 of the access points. The right one is using only 5.
Okay.
6, I'm sorry, 6. So it's using twice as many of them, but it's putting them in different positions. Sure. And each one is actually stronger and it better able to provide coverage than the old systems are. Yeah. So it's not just placement. It would have cost us, you're talking about 2 or 3 times as much to take as many of these as we would need to cover that entire floor.
Yeah.
And you're talking about every floor of every building on campus. It becomes even more expensive than it already was. So it's probably my guess that some of that influenced how it was positioned in the first place. But with the new technologies we're using, we'll be able to design these differently. And we actually paid for the consultant to spend time on campus. They generated these graphs by walking through every floor of every building with devices that would actually help them track how the concentrations lay out now, and then give us recommendations on what should happen.
Huh.
One interesting piece that I always think is interesting to put out is we also had the opportunity to think about putting external coverage available for the first time. Right now, and I'm fond of saying this, if you've ever used wireless outside on campus, it's just an accident right now. Okay. We don't intentionally have wireless access provided outside.
I think I've picked it up in a few places.
Yeah, if you're close enough to a building and there happens to be the right kind of glass, then it can bleed out. But this would be different. This would intentionally be putting wireless coverage on external parts of campus. So this is the first recommendation from the company. We think that there'll be opportunities for us to refine this. Just to give you some frame of reference, this is the College of Health and Human Services. Here's the Atkins Library. Here's a student union. So that the corridor would essentially be following much of the major foot traffic through campus. But we already know there's some areas that we also need to cover. This is that lovely green area outside of Belk Gym. That doesn't make sense to leave that uncovered. The area outside of Woodward Hall, so we know we have some places that we will modify before the plans themselves actually get implemented. And so that's an ongoing conversation with us now. We've been talking to student government, we've been talking to the cabinet, trying to make sure we get these points clarified. But that work actually begins, the expansion project itself begins this semester.
There are plenty of universities and colleges in the world that have figured this out a while ago. And I understand that everything is relative and everything is contextual and everything is what it is. But are we are we lagging behind the world in this kind of connectivity? And
It's a fair question, and
Yeah.
it's one that I've mulled over. Give you an example on wireless. My alma mater, I graduated in '94, which I am hesitant to admit on a public broadcast, but when I graduated in '94, my institution had wireless in '96.
okay,
Right? And so they were one of the first institutions.
this kind where you're outside walking around.
It wasn't outside.
Okay.
But it was in the main buildings, and
Yeah.
they were years ahead of most
Stairwells
institutions.
included.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's the difference. It was a small liberal arts college.
Yeah.
A small private liberal arts college. So your opportunities to do some things when you're a smaller institution are different than they are when you get larger and larger. UNC Charlotte, I think, has been uniquely challenged. Because of my role, I'm on the UNC System CIO Council. So I have an opportunity to talk to the CIOs at all of the other institutions. And we're in this lovely in-between point. I've called it the sweet spot, and I've been teased that that's a very positive description of something that has very negative consequences, and I think this is one. We are too large to do some of the opportunities that the small institutions have, right? As a percentage of your budget, yes, it is expensive to do any of these, but you have some different opportunities when you're a smaller institution, and you may have a physically smaller footprint to cover than you do when you get as large as we are. But we're not large enough that we have the funding mechanisms that some of our sister institutions with much larger budgets or medical schools might have access to. So UNC Charlotte has long struggled with that in-between part where we are. And I think that has been part of why we're playing catch-up in some areas.
Sure. We still have some time here on the live wire, and if you have questions for Michael Cato on anything related to IT services here on campus, please send them in by email or via Twitter. I will give you a programming note to tell you that next Thursday we're going to not be with you, and we will resume the following Thursday, which is March 28th. And at that time, we're going to begin what will likely be a series of consecutive discussions about the impact of football. It's coming. It's actually coming in April with the spring game, and in advance of that, we need to have some discussion for our campus community related to traffic and parking, tailgating policies, and other things related to how we're going to be experiencing America's newest Division I football experience here at UNC Charlotte. So make a note of that, but also in the category of live programming, go to Inside UNC Charlotte this Monday evening, March 18th at 7 o'clock. We will be carrying the live feed from UNC Charlotte Center City of the second in a series of public forums in which we're partnering with the Charlotte Observer. We did one late fall, post-election, in which we had several of the newly elected members of Congress, and we talked about essentially what's next. It was a great event, packed house at UNC Charlotte Center City. Our topic will be mental health. We're going to have a number of experts and key leaders here in Greater Charlotte on a panel discussion, and you've probably seen this covered and promoted in the Charlotte Observer this week. So we're anticipating a great event, and we want to encourage you, if you're not able to attend at Center City, to go ahead and fire up your device at home, or if you happen to be working in the evening here on campus, check it out on Inside UNC Charlotte. We'll be carrying the live feed Monday of this special community forum on mental health in partnership with the Charlotte Observer. Michael, maybe one final thought. This week at a leadership luncheon, Chancellor Dubois talked a little bit in response to a question. The question was, is it better at a university to have centralized administration or decentralized administration? And, lo and behold, I think that, the favorite example in answering that question is IT. And some of the things he pointed out, we've had some tough experiences this last year related to security issues in IT. And I think as those experiences have been painstakingly analyzed, it comes back to pointing to the idea, if we had been more centralized in developing our use of data over the years, and some of these go back a number of years, we might have been able to avoid this, or certainly might have been able to detect it sooner. And I think you made a really valid point when you got up and added to the response that he was giving, where he was saying it would be better to centralize at least some of the aspects of IT to the extent that we don't already. And you said there is something to be gained by taking an approach that's more of a hybrid, because there is value in decentralized in some areas and more centralization in others. Can you just give us maybe some closing thoughts on what you're talking about when you
Sure.
describe that?
Sure, I'll talk about that a bit, and then hopefully use that as a intro to the IT master plan, some of the
Yes.
efforts that we're doing to help us answer that question as an institution. The answer that I gave was that I do think that there are some services that are best delivered in a distributed format, because the closer you are to a researcher or a faculty member in their actual work environment, the higher the chances, I think, are that you better understand what it is they're actually trying to do. The more layers you have removed from that, it sometimes can become difficult to really appreciate what it is they're trying to accomplish. You know, we had a conversation this week about a research grant that one of our, I believe, our social work faculty members is working on, and you know, 2 levels removed, it sounds like, well, it's just a social media effort, and you know, it can be difficult to understand just why this is so important. I happen to know more of the details of it just because I was closer to the faculty member in a prior role. And I think that those translations sometimes a lot can be lost in that translation. And I think it's important to keep that connection as strong as you possibly can. That said, there needs to be that partnership. And I think that's the term that I keep going back to. So that even with that close proximity, you may better understand the need, but you'll also work with the central group to translate that need into action, so that you're not just developing, you know, we're not just developing as an institution 5 different solutions to the same need, when we could share those approaches and develop develop a solution that actually meets those needs in a way that allows us to do it effectively, so that we don't have the challenges of security that we had before, that 2 or 3 different groups are doing effectively the same thing. No one knows about it until something goes wrong. No one knows that there's data in those systems that shouldn't be there, until something happens and the data gets exposed. So we've got to find ways to be able to develop those partnerships. And as a result, I think, well, this has been in the works for a couple of years, that Vice Chancellor Beth Harden and the former CIO, Jay Dominic, had been conceiving a concept of what we're now calling the IT Master Plan. Mm-hmm. There's actually a website that I would encourage anyone to take a look at, itmasterplan.uncc.edu. The project itself is to bring in an outside consultant. Barry Dunn is the firm that we're working with, and they're helping us they describe it as 2 different phases. I like to use 3 because there's two parts to the first one. The first is to do a full campus assessment. You asked me before, what's the percentage of centralized or distributed? And I told you we believe it's about half and half. Mm-hmm. It's because we don't really know as an institution how much IT spend happens outside of ITS. Sure. We know ours, right? And I'm sure many of the other groups know theirs as well, but because we don't really have a comprehensive view, we don't really know what the overall availability of funds are for IT services on campus and what we're actually spending as an institution. So that's part of it. But they'll also be looking at personnel. They're going to be looking at services. What services are we offering as an institution across the board, so that we have all that on the table and really have a true accounting of what are we doing as an institution. Part of that, they'll take those results and help us do a number of benchmarking studies to answer questions like the one you asked, to compare us to other institutions. What are we getting for the amount that we're investing? What services are we offering that others are not, or vice versa? You know, where are the gaps that we still have as an institution that will pose a challenge for us as we continue to grow and to serve the state itself, the state and the region. And then the third part of it will be to develop a series of recommendations. A strategic plan is a term we've been using, but really we want it to be practical and something that we can act on to help us envision what we should be as an institution, and a 5-year plan to go from where we are to where we should be. Yeah, and that's what we're doing overall.
Okay, and again, the website is
itmasterplan.uncc.edu.
So I'm hoping that folks who are watching will take that as an opportunity to check that out. And is it okay if they have any specific questions that they might want to send your way as well?
Sure, they're welcome to contact me with questions, but the website actually has the contact information for the project manager, C.E. Pierce, who's probably the best contact to go to on campus. But we've also put the contact information on the website for the consultants. So if you have questions or you'd like to contribute to the conversation, we're encouraging anyone on campus to get in touch with them as well.
Well, I think that's a great point to end, because it kind of signals the the beginning of our next conversation, which I think will hopefully be a little bit more discussion about the process of developing that master plan. And who knows, because like we've been saying throughout our time together today, so much changes so quickly in the world of IT that it's definitely a moving target. But we appreciate you being here today, and if you see Michael on the sidewalk today, be sure to tell him he did a great job, because he did a great job. And if you have suggestions for any of our future programs and you'd like to reach us, just send it to that Inside UNC Charlotte email address you've been seeing on your screen today. We're open to suggestions on how best to use this format. Once again, the irony of going on a worldwide platform to essentially reach the folks who are our colleagues here on campus, but that's the state of affairs with technology today. And we're going to try this and see if we can help enlighten us in kind of our working knowledge of what's going on here at UNC Charlotte, who does what and how they're doing it. And so we appreciate you being here today.
Appreciate the opportunity.
And we'll look forward to having you again. As I said, next week we take a break, and we'll be back the following week with the beginning of probably 2 or 3 rounds of discussion on the coming impact of football, particularly as it relates to parking, access to campus on game days, that sort of thing. So thank you for putting us on your screens today, and we look forward to being with you again. Don't forget Monday night's special live webcast at 7 o'clock here on Inside UNC Charlotte of the Community Forum on Mental Health from UNC Charlotte Center City. So until next time, so long.
Thank you.